Well, hello to everyone who is watching with us right now. Welcome to Wednesday in the Word, hosted by New Era Church. My name is Tony Hart, and I'm so honored to be hosting and helping monologue this new conversation that we're having on how we take care of our neighbors in the midst of COVID-19. Pastor Moore, he has invited an awesome pastor in the city here of Indianapolis to be able to share with this conversation. And so, Pastor Moore, I'll have you introduce who's with us today as we get ready to jump into this conversation.
Thank you. We have as our guest today, to those of you that are listening, Pastor Jeff Krajewski of the Common Ground Church here in our great city, not too far from New Era Church. And he and I have forged a relationship, and I am just so enamored with his heart for the community, and not just his community, but the community of all God's children. And I can't wait for the church to hear, and for those of you that are listening, to hear his heart on how he understands what the true church should be about.
Absolutely. So, Pastor Jeff, how are you doing in this season? How are you and your family holding up in the midst of COVID-19 and everything that's going on right now?
Yeah. Well, hello, New Era Church. It's nice to meet you. Unfortunately, I can't see you, but hopefully one day I'll be able to see you in person. But thank you all for having me. I really appreciate it. I was honored when you asked. And I think for myself, my family, my wife, we are ready to get out and get back to life, whatever that's going to look like on the other side. I know that there's a lot of speculation as to how this is all going to kind of roll out and what the new normal is going to look like. But I'm a people person. I know your pastor is a people person because I like to be around him, and I know that you all do too. And I want to be with people. That's why I got into this. I want people to be able to meet Jesus. And so as difficult as this has been, I'm ready for the next season to happen. But we're doing okay. Thanks for asking.
Absolutely. Yes, sir. And so one more question for you, Pastor Jeff, just so people can get a little context of you and who you are, since we are talking about neighboring and who are our neighbors. Can you share a favorite childhood moment of what it was like to grow up in your neighborhood, and just give us some insight to who you are and the neighborhood that you grew up in?
Yeah. So I grew up in a lot of neighborhoods. My family moved a lot. And I think I lived in 15 different houses before I was in 6th grade. So my parents flipped houses before flipping houses was a thing. I was born in Grand Rapids. I have lots of memories of lots of different little pockets. I lived in Nashville, Tennessee for a little while. I grew up, I would say that my formative years, my late elementary through graduation, was in Zionsville, Indiana. So I'm a local kid as far as that goes. And for those of you that know anything about Zionsville in the 1980s, it was a bubble. It was a very exclusive, small, cultural bubble. And I won't go too far into that other than to say that there were no persons of color in our community. So I grew up in an all-white context, all-white neighborhood, all-white school until I graduated. That was my framework. Interestingly, my great-grandfather was African American, and I didn't know him growing up. I knew my great-grandmother, but I didn't know him. And growing up, I would go over to her house on a regular basis and mow her grass. When I was 10, 11, 12, I would go over on a Saturday and mow the grass, and there were no pictures in the house of family. And I never really thought to think or ask, was she ever married? Who was her husband? Anything like that. Didn't know anything. When I was 20 years old, my mom sat me down and she said, "I want to tell you something. Your great-grandfather was black." She told me as if we had somehow as a family, and I love my mom, but like we had made it. In spite of the fact that great-grandfather was an African American, we made it. And so for me as a pastor, that is a formative moment in how I think about what it means to be a follower of Jesus and the world in which we live in, and how sometimes, and how I grew up in a world that was discontinuous to the gospel, right? I lived in a very separated, isolated space where I was not forced to think about or encounter the challenges that now at 38th and Ruckle, my neighbors are dealing with in this particular situation. And it's very different from the way that I'm dealing with it. So I'm going too far, too fast, but I'll stop right there.
Yes,
Sorry.
sir. Well, thank you for that insight, Pastor Jeff. We definitely appreciate that. Pastor Moore, I'll ask you that same question. Can you share just a memory of your neighborhood growing up? Did you see
Yeah,
anything that made your neighbors stand out to you more than others? So just give us some context around that for you.
absolutely. Intriguing. I didn't know you had a black great grandfather.
No, just great grandfather. So my grandmother is his daughter.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was close.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good. Okay, I guess that must be why I like you. I don't know. That's
I knew.
so. I grew up in somewhat in a bubble too of just strictly a very poor African American environment. And the first time, only interactions we had with white people was the fact that my dad had to pay a white guy rent, and so we would go to the white man's business to pay rent. And I remember my father trying to get him to fix certain things around the house that we had a hard time getting done. And so my orientation was that early on, and then I finally got a chance to interact with white people in the 10th grade. Can you believe that? The 10th grade. I don't know how old you are, maybe what, 15, 14, 15 years old. And what it was, they integrated our schools in Carolina, and they integrated my neighborhood school that I could walk to. And then they bust in the white kids. Well, of course, before they bust in the white kids, they renovated the whole school. We got everything that we always begged for years. All of a sudden, we got a football field, and we got new classrooms and new books and computers and all of that. Well, we're all standing out waiting for the white kids to get off the bus. And the first person I saw off the bus was a white girl who had on, I had never heard of braces. She smiled, and all I saw was metal. And so in the black community, we didn't go to the dentist. We didn't have money to go to the dentist. And I couldn't figure out why she had metal teeth. And now our rappers have metal teeth, everything. So they must have cut. We finally caught up, Jeff, to you guys. Now we got metal in our mouths too. We got gold tooth and everything. But my first metal in the mouth was a little white girl get off the bus. And so, and last thing, not my childhood, Minister Hart, but I'm married to my wife who is they have a farm down in Carolina, and the owner of the land is a white man that impregnated their great grandmother and had all these kids. And so he's literally buried across the street from what is now a black community. And here is, but his family won't come and visit him because they have written off that part of his history. That he's buried across the street from Pope's mother's house, but he has no visitors. So that is kind of tells you how the enemy has divided all of us, even the good Christians, in this area of race.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing those insights with us. I think that takes us exactly to where we want to be tonight as we start our conversation, because I think there are a lot of things that as we get into the conversation of neighbors that we don't see far beyond what's present in front of us. And so you guys jumped the horse before you put the horse before the saddle before the horse rather, and I think that's going to be perfect for as we continue to dive into what we have for tonight. And so as we continue to head that direction, there's three objectives that I feel like we can definitely cover tonight. Number one would be, how do we inspire individuals to look beyond themselves? And then the second one would be, how do we encourage individuals to understand the struggles that others are going through in this season of COVID-19? And those struggles may not be affecting our zip code, but they are affecting individuals who may be literally a block from us. And so how do we encourage individuals to see that? And then lastly, I want to invite individuals who may be watching this with us this evening. How do we reach out to someone beyond our zip code? How do we make our reach go far beyond than just walking to the driveway? And so I think those are three objectives that we can definitely cover tonight. I know by the conversation that's happened already, we're going to be blessed to be able to get there. And so as we think about this conversation of how do we see our neighbors, how are we taking care of our neighbors in this COVID-19, a passage of scripture jumps out to me out of the book of Matthew, and Jesus, we see him talking, and he's saying, we are to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. And that comes out that 22nd chapter of Matthew. And I think that's so evident of what we're going through right now. It may not be affecting us in our homes and the people who may be in our homes, but we see our neighbors being affected by this every day. And I believe Jesus set the greatest example of reach out to those neighbors, care for them in their time, and see what you can do for them. And so as we look at that, and I think there's another dynamic that we have here, and you both have hit on it that I wanted to bring up, but I think as we talk about neighbors, we're talking about people who represent different communities, different races, different social economical statuses that are out there. And I think it's incredible that we have a Black pastor and a white pastor to be able to discuss what does the nature of seeing our neighbor truly look like. How do we cross those racial boundaries? How do we cross those boundaries that naturally separate us to truly have what Jesus is saying here in this 22nd chapter of Matthew, that love that we have for ourselves? How do we express that to others? And so I know this is going to be an incredible conversation with two incredible pastors. And so, Pastor Jeff, I'll start with you. How do you define what a neighbor is? How are you defining neighbor to your congregation, to your family, to the community that you live in? How do you define that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's probably a couple of ways that you can approach it, right? So that, like, literally the people that looking out my window, the people that I can see that live around me are my neighbors. And one of the things that we regularly talk about at our church is that if you can't stand on your front porch and name the names of the people who live in the houses around you, you're not doing your job as a follower of Jesus. We should know the people that live around us. And so, I think literally that's the first piece. But I think then there's this next theological piece that's deeper than that. It's the people that I choose to interact with, right? And I have a choice, for the most part, to determine who and how I will interact with other people, where I choose to shop, where I choose to entertain, where I work out, where I choose to live. These are all choices that I'm making based on the sorts of neighbors that I want to have to interact with. And so I would kind of take it both of those ways. It's the people that I interact with because of the way I live my life, and then it's literally the people that live around me.
Absolutely. Pastor, I'll let you take a stab at that as well, of how do you define who a neighbor is?
Yeah, I think Jeff is right. We have to. It's a geographical reference. It's a proximity reference, and the geographical and the proximity reference should not be overlooked because the person is of a different color. And so I would challenge my white pastor friends when we would have conversations, is that why do you have to fly all the way to Africa to interact with Black people?
Oh, come on.
When you have Black people right down the street from you, why are you uncomfortable with us, but you're comfortable going across to Ghana and Kenya and all those places? And because we are your neighbor also. Matter of fact, proximity-wise, we're your nearest neighbor. And it's always a challenging question for for all of us to consider is, is this Hispanic family, and I'll put me where I sometimes have biases. Is this Hispanic person just as much as my neighbor as the African American on the other side of me or the white person on the other side of me? So I think we all have some biases that we have to all work through.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Pastor Jeff, going back to you, you pastor a church in 3 different locations. Diversity is represented amongst all 3 of those locations, and so knowing that, how has COVID-19 affected the neighborhoods that you pastor in, and then with having 3 locations, how are you handling the needs that's at every location based on those demographics?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the church that I directly oversee and have influence in here in Midtown is in Butler Tarkington. And if you know the history of Butler Tarkington, it's historically very racially and socioeconomically divided. And so it is very different in terms of the COVID impact, right? So I think I heard somebody say that everybody's in the storm, but a lot of people don't have umbrellas.
Right.
And so that is very true of our neighborhood. The south side of our neighborhood is affected very differently than the north side of our neighborhood. And we sit sort of at that crossroads at 46th Street.
Yeah.
So it's just stark. We have a good relationship with the Martin Luther King Jr. Center, and we've got people volunteering there and delivering food and trying to get kids on devices and doing things like that. But the pivot point when this hit was just so obviously racialized, right? So the families in my church in Butler Tarkington are primarily white, primarily upper middle class. Their biggest concern was, how are we going to do work and school at home? The families that live in my neighborhood, in the south side of my neighborhood, their primary question was, how are we going to feed our children?
Mm-hmm.
And so it couldn't be any more obvious. And so I think we've really tried to pivot, because the obvious need hasn't hit our congregation directly, but it has hit our neighborhood directly.
Yeah.
And so if proximity is one of those things that makes us a neighbor, we gotta figure out how to love accurately.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Pastor, I'll ask you that same question. How has COVID-19 affected the New Era area?
Yeah, it's been said that when white America gets a cold, Black America gets the flu.
Yeah.
And so it's always worse. And so the folks south of Common Ground, where we're at 30th Street. Common Ground is at 40. So only 12 blocks south of where Jeff pastors. Our biggest concern is not only food. And I have to go to work. I can't shelter at home because I am the grocery store clerk, or I'm driving the bus. And so I am literally in the midst of this valley of the virus, and I have no options but take the risk in order to put food on the table of my family. And then we have children who don't have access to the internet, as Jeff was talking about, trying to help MLK Center with those issues. And so it's both a physiological or sociological issue that we're all facing now. New Era Church is beginning out because of gentrification. Our area is changing some, and so but right now the change is coming from the north to the south, and then from the south up toward the north. We're still in the zone where we still have the sociological issues. And right now we're pushing a lot of the dope addicts and people like that right around our church. Mm-hmm. Eventually that's going to all be different, I say, in the next 5 years, because I think Jeff's and our community are going to actually become one as the gentrification takes place, as the housings get rebuilt and all of that. So New Era is trying to understand what's this new reality going to be. And so, I need to have a Jeff on my team.
Hmm.
We need to start looking at how we begin to diversify our staffs, because our neighborhoods are going to change tremendously, I think, in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yep.
Absolutely. Pastor Jeff, I think, with your last answer to the question I asked you, I think that ties in very well with the question I'm going to ask now. Um, since, Common Ground, especially in that Butler Tarkington area, because of its location, in that area, African Americans have a greater risk to the COVID-19 virus that is playing a role in our society right now. And so with knowing that, what goals or what steps, could Common Ground be taking, or is Common Ground taking in this season to be able to impact those that are more significantly at risk?
Yeah. So we have an organization that meets in our building, has met in that building before we were even a church there. There was other churches before us. It's an organization called Heritage Place, and they provide senior day services for the neighborhood, and it's primarily been historically an African American population. And so, every day our building's filled with seniors who are playing bridge and getting their taxes done. It's just a really great organization. So obviously they can't meet. They're in that most vulnerable space, and so we have taken the opportunity to get their membership list and pass it out to our congregation. And so we're just making phone calls, checking on people, just making sure everybody has what they need, doing grocery runs, picking up medicine, making sure that most vulnerable population can indeed stay at home because they need to. And so that's one of the things we've been doing. The other thing that I mentioned MLK, but they have a fabulous relationship with the families in our neighborhood that are connected to School 43, that elementary school right there.
Mm-hmm.
So they're already networked in ways that couldn't even imagine. And so all we're doing is saying, tell us what you need and how much of it you need, and we will make sure that you have it. And so rent assistance and utility assistance and all of those things that people need in order to continue to stay afloat. They're doing a great job, and so we just didn't want to recreate the wheel and try to do something at our place with people who don't have a relationship with us, and so we just threw all of our eggs in behind the MLK basket.
Awesome. Pastor, I got a question for you. You've mentioned a few times that COVID-19 has directly impacted the New Era Church family. And so when you think about that impact and, how has New Era positioned itself to use the resources it has to be able to help those within the congregation and outside the congregation? And then a follow-up to that question is, knowing that it is going to take resources, what are churches like New Era and churches alike in need of to be able to help the community?
Yeah. So because our food pantry is shut down right now, we've decided to support Gleaners Food Bank. And as you know, Gleaners is not only feeding, I think we gave enough money to feed 2,500 people just in the month of April. We're also sending monies to Willow Mission where they do hot meals. And so we're kind of resourcing this. I love what Jeff and Common Ground are doing, where they're actually helping those people that know how to do what they know how to feed people and they know how to take care of folks. So we're sending resources in those arenas too, and not try to recreate that. Realizing every week we have a phone call with our leaders trying to ascertain, we think the wheels are going to come off our vehicle at some point if this pandemic continues, because our folk are the first hired and the first fired. Mm-hmm. So we do know that we're going to have a tsunami of need coming, not only in our community, but also in our church. And so we're already trying to figure out, okay, so we're helping these other organizations. I think we're supporting a transition house for men coming out of prison right now, Gleaners, Willow Mission, and we're also supporting the Dove House, which is a drug rehabilitation space for women. And I think those women are Black, white, brown, whomever. But we realize the tsunami is coming to the African American community, and we are going to need resources to be able to feed people. and to house people. We think in the next, month to 2 months, if we don't find a vaccine and people start getting sick all over again, we think it's going to be detrimental to our economy. And so we're getting ready for that tsunami.
Yep, absolutely. So Pastor Moore, kind of piggybacking off of the economy, Pastor Jeff, I'll let you take the first stab at this. But for some people, the economic challenges that have heightened in this season of COVID-19 are some people's everyday reality. So living paycheck to paycheck, having to be selective, as you said, where they shop at based on price and communities that they're in. Another one, a huge one that I know is happening on the front lines is, will I have adequate childcare? And so how has 2019 created an awakening for congregations all over the world, all over our country, to realize that the current challenges that are being illuminated because of COVID-19 are prevalent outside of this pandemic?
Yeah. And I wish I could say that there has been a great awakening. I don't think yet, though we're going to do a series just like this, so I'm really excited that I get a practice run, and I need to get Pastor Moore on the hook so that he can come and help us. I don't think there's been that big aha that there needs to be. So for us, my responsibility as a pastor is to remind my congregation who our neighbors are, right? And then to remind them who the situations that these neighbors are in. And so we're trying to regularly highlight the need, and we're trying to give them information on the disproportionality that exists, and that this is not just because a pandemic hit. It's simply because the system is rigged in the wrong way.
Right.
So I hope going forward is that we don't just see that this is a problem, but that we start to think differently about how our theology affects our politics. And if we truly are followers of Jesus in the way of sacrificial love, loving our neighbor as we would love ourselves, then what do we do with the power that we have? And how are we leveraging it? Is it to, hunker down, protect ourselves? That would not be the example of the gospel. Or is it to open our hands and ask God where we can lay our lives down? And I think this is another opportunity for us to respond in the way of Jesus.
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't think, I keep hearing people say we want to get back to normal. I know what they kind of mean, but we really can't get back to normal, especially the church.
No.
And the evangelical community, or whatever label you want to put on yourselves, we can't go back to where we are so segregated and afraid to deal with the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
There are some systemic issues that are real, and no one is blaming anyone. It's the reality.
Yeah.
Right. And so we have to deal with the reality that let's take some steps of transformation, and not just steps of transactionalism.
Yep.
And transformation means what you and I do a lot is actually sitting down with a cup of coffee, looking each other in the eye and saying, man, we know we are so different, and we know we have such different experiences, but I love you, and I want so much Christ in me to be real and to be relevant.
Yep.
And I think that's what we need: transformational relationships, instead of just tutoring people and feeding people, but how do we really go deeper?
Yep.
Where we really become brothers.
Well, and I think that, in Ephesians, Paul says that in Christ, the dividing wall of hostility has been torn down. And while that may be true in the theological realm, it's not been actualized in the physical realm to the extent that it expresses Christ's intentions. And so that's why, for me, we need New Era. We cannot be the body of Christ without New Era. It's just not possible. And we have a deficient gospel if it's just a white evangelical version. It lacks its true potency.
Yeah. And Minister Hart, I think New Era has to be a bridge.
Mhm.
We have to somehow, with the love of Christ, diminish the hostilities we have and some of the injustices we've endured, and become that community whereby we can be a bridge, where we can be a comfortable place as much as possible, where white and black can really have some serious and some very transformational experiences. I think God is calling New Era Church to be that bridge, whether it be common ground or whether it be Northview. If people wanting a place to start that bridge, I think God is calling New Era to be that place. And common ground, and Jeff and I have had conversations around this, and he means it in his heart. Which I really admire him, because he's going to catch heat from some aspect of his parishioners, but I'm going to catch heat from some aspect of mine too, because there's a distrust for white people when it comes to the historicity of our journeys together. One thing, can I go have Jeff go back and explain something? You mentioned, Minister Hart, that Common Ground had some different locations. You do have a location where you have an African American pastor. Is that still the case?
We have we have an African American woman on our staff.
On your staff,
Mm-hmm.
Right? Do you have a church that's predominantly black, or is all the Common Ground locations?
So our North Side congregation is probably a little farther ahead in their diversity.
Okay.
They're and I don't want to say that they're a multi-ethnic church, but they are the most diverse of our congregations. And then we're slowly kind of coming along. And for me, again, I don't think the end game in my mind is that our church looks a certain way.
Right.
Our people have a certain posture, that we are advocates of reconciliation, that we live in a posture of reconciliation. I mean, the Holy Spirit will do what He wants to do with who shows up on Sunday.
Yeah.
We have a responsibility to be ambassadors, and that's sort of the pathway that we're on. We're not on a pathway to become a multi-ethnic church, though. Let me just say, I would love it, but it's not the goal.
Right.
Yeah. And I think New Era is in the same place.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I can say firsthand from this conversation alone and what's been discussed already, I think both you, Pastor Jeff, and you, Pastor Moore, are being that bridge for this conversation to go out, to be able to reach people of all different demographics, to say, this is the stance that the church is desiring to take. And so for those unbelievers who are skeptical, I think this is an inviting conversation for them to step in and say, okay, I can make that step, even if my curiosities that I may have, but also for believers who are actively, seeking their faith and practicing their faith. This is a conversation that lets them know this is what we stand for as a church. And so I think this is a great bridge for conversations to happen beyond this. And so I appreciate both of your time and what you're doing this evening. We'll continue to dive into some questions here. So a pastoring question, and a different way of just looking at the church, but as pastors, you've handled funerals, you've handled tough conversations with members in your congregation, and you've even handled debatable topics. However, COVID-19 is a different type of beast that has showed up and affected our lives, affected our churches, affected how pastors go throughout their everyday duties. And so taking that in mind, your calling is to constantly encourage individuals. How have you sought out new ways to encourage individuals in this season? Pastor Moore, we'll start with you on that one.
Okay. This whole this whole online environment is brand new for me. I'm having to learn some skills that I haven't been able to hone or to to develop. I'm having to go on the fly. This happened so fast. I mean, church was normal up until what, March 7th or March 8th, and then the whole thing the whole thing just fell apart. And here we are now, as if God has placed us in the valley of dry bones. And here we are preaching to empty churches and trying to somehow personalize our messages and make them relevant without, in the African American experience, getting a call and response. Now, Jeff is used to preaching and not hearing anything out there.
Is this thing on? Hello?
If he gets an amen every now and then, he's like, whoa, I'm preaching. So, but for me, in my experience, it's like, where is Aunt Haggie and where, where's that sister that always waved her hand when I said something, and so now I'm in Jeff's world. So I'm having to retool and regroup and be okay with that and try to, in a personable way, interact with people by looking into a camera. But we also are making more phone calls, and I'm trying to encourage my leaders around me to be more personable, to be more available to the congregation. And so, yeah.
Awesome. Pastor Jeff?
Yeah, for me, I also just miss the energy when people who are like-minded gather together. There's just that's why we want to do it. It's because we believe in this. It is a crazy story, right? Death, burial, and resurrection. And I just want, on a weekly basis, to be able to look around and be like, okay, there's some other crazy people that are in with this too. So we're good for another week. You know what I mean? So there is that loss that being in the same space with people. A lot of our congregants live in the neighborhood, so I'm actually just making my way through the neighborhood, knocking on doors and jumping off porches and doing waves and checking in with people. We're making phone calls. We have a pretty robust small group network that's continued to operate virtually, as difficult as that is. I think I've been interested to see how this experience uncovers how we think, who we are as the people of God, right? So Peter says, you are a chosen people, royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession. And we are that. Whether we are building, we're that when we're in the building, and we're that when we're in our neighborhood.
That's right.
And the thing that holds the building together, the glue, is the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
And he transcends time, space, continuums and knits us together. So I actually, like Pastor Moore was saying, I think this could be a time of creativity, imagination, where we start to think about what does it mean for us to be the people of God. So I think there's a great opportunity here as well.
Absolutely. I think COVID-19 has reassured and has authenticated my thoughts on when the scripture talks about needing one another. It has accentuated the fact that we really do thrive on interaction and being connected. And so when that's taken from us, it's amazing to me how we miss that. And I think it's like any relationship we have when we take stuff for granted and then it's kind of jeopardized or it's removed for a while, we miss it. And so I think what this is teaching us is that we do need each other. We need to be there for one another. And when those folks showed up just to drive by the church and say, hi, Pastor Moore, we love you, that let me know that you're right, that the Holy Spirit is still moving in the valley of the dry bones. And the only way those bones came together was that the winds from the four corners blew on them. And so I believe God has taken the church of Jesus Christ and he is reconfiguring us and recalibrating us and reminding us that we do need one another. And regardless of race, COVID-19 has taught us, regardless of denominationalism or any kind of other ism, Christ is one body. And I hope we come out of this unified.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think that's Pastor Moore, a perfect segue into this next question of unity. I think there's although we may have different struggles and COVID-19 is affecting us in different ways, I think there is a sense of unity that we need to have. And so looking at that sense of on unity, I think one common disconnector is someone who may be living in the suburbs. Through COVID-19, their biggest struggle may be when am I going to return back into the office, or when how do I get enough bandwidth to hold, e-learning, trying to work from home, and all these other things I need to be connected to the internet. That may be someone's biggest issue in the midst of this COVID-19 crisis. However, in the inner city, you may have individuals who are saying, I can't afford to even get tested because I live in a high, dense population who may be more susceptible to COVID-19, or my job was just taken away. And so now I can't even support my family because I was working an hourly position. Because of COVID-19, everything's been taken away from me. So now I have to find resources to feed my family, and all these different extremes that people are feeling. And sometimes it feels like we're disconnected in those areas. And so, what are ways that stop us from seeing sometimes what our neighbors who may not live in our zip code are truly going through?
Yeah, I feel for my brothers and sisters in the rural communities, and there aren't many African Americans folk in the rural communities, but I think that community is going to be suffering too, and they're not going to be the upper middle class individuals that frequent common ground, or probably 50% of our churches in that arena too, upper middle class. And so I'm hoping that somehow urban America and rural America can begin to see that hey, we have some same issues. We all are trying to feed our families. We're all trying to make sure that we are comfortable with a certain level of living. And so I'm hoping that at the end of the day, that white pastors and black pastors and brown pastors can unify and be there for all of us.
Absolutely. Pastor
Yeah, I think we need to model in our relationships what we would hope that our congregants would be living in their relationship. And so, if we're not in relationship with people who are not like us, then we need to find ways in which we can have relationships. And sometimes that means you've got to get outside of your zip code. Like if I was in high school, I would have had to go somewhere else. Now, fortunately, I played basketball, which sort of put me in spaces where I was forced to deal with people that weren't like me. But like our systems are perfectly designed to get the results that they're getting. And so if I don't have any relationships with people who aren't like me, it's because I've decided to.
Yeah.
And so we have to decide something else if we want there to be that unity. And the only way that we will have compassion for others is if we get to hear and know their stories.
Yeah.
And if we don't, we're only hearing stories about the people who are just like us. They have the same problems that we do. And so we have no frame of reference for the whole of our neighboring community.
Yeah, great point. You know why you made the basketball team, don't you? Your great grandfather.
Listen. Okay. I don't know how appropriate this is going to be, but I'm slow and I can't jump.
Oh,
I made that gene. I did not make it because of that. The other side of my family is Eastern European Polish. I mean, my last name is Krajewski, so it's like.
Well, I must admit that I missed that gene too, because I can't jump either. That's definitely a stereotype.
Very, very much so.
Oh boy, yes.
Awesome. Well, I have truly enjoyed this time together. Just being, influenced by both of the wisdom that God has downloaded into these two incredible pastors has helped me. I know it's helping those who are watching alongside of us right now as well. And so speaking to those individuals who may be watching, as we close with this question, Oftentimes we go to church and say that was a great sermon, but we don't necessarily apply it to our lives. And so taking that same measure with this conversation, I would hate for someone to watch this, hear this great insight of how we can truly care for those around us, how we see our neighbors, and say that was a great discussion. And so what are some practical things that we can apply now in our lives, even in the midst of COVID-19, to be able to care for those that we know, but also care for those outside of our zip code? Pastor Jeff, can you start on that one?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think being intentional about thinking about, and this is how I would approach my congregation. If you're not thinking about how this is affecting others, you're going to miss the moment of formation for yourself. And so if this is only about me, if this is only about how I'm going to get through this, then you're missing the opportunity. So you started out with the passage in Matthew, right? And then Jesus tells the story of the Good Samaritan. And the mind-blowing thing about the story is that he stopped. Because they were on a dangerous road. You don't stop on that road, even if somebody's in trouble. Yeah. And so I think there's something embedded in there that we, in our place of vulnerability, have the opportunity to offer something. That's a kingdom principle. Mm. And I think so if I can get my people outside and their problems, I mean, I'm not trying to diminish the fact that you got all these kids at home, you're trying to homeschool, you're trying to work, that's right. Stressful.
Yeah. Right.
And yet there's opportunity for us to look beyond that to others.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's great.
Pastor, any insight on that as well? Just some practical things that we can put into place?
Well, again, I think that the story of the Good Samaritan is a great segue as we close tonight, because it was turned upside down to where the offended was taking care of the offender. Yeah. And so the offended became the bridge to help the offender get to a place of safety. And when Christ told that story, it made a lot of folk upset, because in their minds, there's no way the Samaritan can be my neighbor. Yeah. And so not only was he your neighbor, but he actually became the hero of the story. Yeah. And so I think that that's who I think New Era is to become that agent, that bridge where we can begin to reach across the aisle to our brothers and say, I offer to you the healing balm of Christ. Yeah. And before we get to heaven and see Jesus walk out on stage with that afro, I'm waving get together down here. Okay?
Right now.
let's get used to each other right now, because you're going to be a miserable in heaven if you don't change your views. Oh boy! So I'm grateful for this time with my brother, and but some more tangible things we're going to do. I want the audience to know that Common Ground in New York Church are actually, I'm going to be joining a Zoom call with Pastor Jeff and his folk in his congregation. We're going to actually literally do some transformational things and try to put some teeth. It's going to be uncomfortable for all of us, but he's committed and I'm committed to continuing this journey to be the real church.
Yeah. And I want to address something, Minister, that you said earlier about, or maybe Pastor Moore, someone said something about the skepticism from the African American community towards the evangelical white community. And that's well earned.
Yeah.
We have failed as your brothers and sisters. And so I have no presumption that that you should just, that's in the past, or it wasn't me, or like, it's real. It's been long. We have, being slow to the game is not even the right way to say it.
Right.
We have shirked our Christian brotherhood duty that we should have been there so many times, and we weren't. And And that's not everyone. I mean, there are very
No,
few examples of people who were,
exactly.
a few denominations that were, but for the
Absolutely.
most part, we have earned your skepticism. And
Absolutely.
I think, it's only by the Holy Spirit's power that that dividing wall could maybe at some point come down again.
Yeah. I tell people all the time, especially in the Black community, that I know we have a race issue, but really the bigger issue is that we have a human problem issue. That if Black people were in charge and was in power, we'd probably be treating other people the same way. So we have a human condition problem, and only Christ could help us do that. But you can't receive Christ and not become Christ-like. And that's what we have to continue to challenge our congregation. So how do we become more Christ-like? And that's what our white evangelical brothers have got to ask, look in the mirror and ask. They'll preach about every ism but racism.
Yep.
And then we have our own issues in the African American community too that we're afraid to touch, like homosexualism and stuff like that. So we all got our challenges.
Yeah. Well, this has been a great conversation. I wish we could continue to go on, and I'm sure we'll have opportunities to have more dialogue post COVID-19, or at least post the heightened season of it. So just want to thank you, Pastor Jeff, and you, Pastor Moore, for jumping on to this meeting and having this, what I believe is a truly important conversation, because even post COVID-19, pre COVID-19, how we see our neighbors is going to be a subject that we all could learn a little bit more and understand, how life is just affecting individuals and how we can step in and truly show that love of Jesus, and show that love that we're supposed to have for ourselves to others as well. So thank you both for your time. Thank you both for your incredible wisdom and insightfulness that you have allowed us to see. Thank you for showing us the man behind the pastor as well. I think in these times, it's awesome to see how our pastors are dealing with this as well. We got to understand they're human beings, and they're having some of the same challenges that we're having as well. So thank you for everything that you've allowed us to see behind the scenes of the church and everything. And so we thank you. Pastor Jeff, do you mind closing us out in prayer? Just praying for our community, praying for those being affected right now, and just praying for the sustainability of the church.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you also for the invitation and for your moderation. I'll tell you, you put two people who like to talk on a Zoom call together, I mean, that can get sideways really quickly, but well done. Thank you for that. Thank you for your leadership. Yeah.
Can I say something? Can I say something before Jeff prays us out? I want to say something to the Common Ground Church. I want to say to you that thank you so much for you allowing your pastor to extend himself into the communities. And I pray that we can continue to build a partnership together as we continue to hear God's voice. I believe the time is getting late in the evening. Christ is on his way back. And God has, through this pandemic, has silenced some of our bells, our sports. He's messing with our bank accounts. He's nullified our social circles. And he's getting us to understand that we really need to focus on him. And so I hope that in days to come and months to come, that New Era Church and you, Common Ground, can find really wonderful ways we can begin to be the real church of Jesus Christ.
Thank you. I mean, that's it right there. But let me pray for you as well as we close here tonight.
Thank you.
Father, we come before you in the name of Jesus, and you tell us that when we come in the name of Jesus, we can come right into the throne of grace, and we can come with confidence, and we can expect to receive mercy and help in our time of need, and we could not be in a more dire time of need. And so I pray that you would do something miraculous. We need what only you can give us.
Yes.
And so I pray for the city of Indianapolis as we are experiencing this pandemic in our own unique way. I just pray that for our leaders, I pray that you would give them wisdom to be careful and cautious and to think about people. And I pray that they would think about all people, and particularly those people who are most vulnerable to this disease, that there would be a serious compassion that would exude decision making and direct the way that resources are allocated. And I pray for the church in Indianapolis right now, that this would be a purifying moment, that
Yeah.
desert time would allow us to destroy some of those idols that are not necessary, that it
Yes.
to rethink what it means for us to be the people of God, that we would stop trying to build our own kingdoms, and we would start joining with one another in building your kingdom.
Yes.
Thank you for New Era. I thank you for the historic work that they've done in their neighborhood. And I pray, Holy Spirit, that you would fill them with everything they need to be the hands and feet of Jesus in this time. I pray for the pastoral staff, for the leadership, for the congregation. I pray that you would just fill them up in this time, and that you would give them an overflow to share with their neighbors. And I pray the same for here in Butler Tarkington. And I thank you for this time. For the opportunity to be able to bless one another, and say these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Well, thank you again, Pastor Jeff, for that prayer. Thank you, Pastor Moore, for hosting this time together as we spend Wednesday in the Word, our At the Table series. It's been an incredible conversation, and we cannot wait to have this conversation again and be able to do something collectively as churches coming together to bless people's lives and to spread the news of Jesus Christ. And so to the New Era family and friends, we thank you for watching this evening. We'll see you next week, same time, 7 p.m. God bless you.
Take care.